Good afternoon. Good afternoon to all. This is Rabbi Sachs coming to you from the Chai Center, and welcome. Welcome to the Chai Academy. Chai Academy is, we try to meet a few times a week to discuss topics of Jewish interest. For the past few couple weeks, at least, we've been talking about modern day Israel, and we're kind of working through the years. So, for example, yesterday we spoke about 1975, the UN, their resolution, Zionism is racism, and now we're moving on to some interesting um, happenings, events that occurred in 1976, and tomorrow we'll probably do 1977. So, today we're going to talk about Entebbe. Now you're familiar, they made movies of this, and it's really an incredible story. Just a heads up, by the way, that this class may be a little bit shorter because I have a funeral to run to. So the Entebbe, essentially, what happened was it was an Air France flight, and it was hijacked. This took place on June 27th, 1976. So it was hijacked, and it was flown to Uganda. Who were the hijackers? The hijackers were the front, Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. Now, what made them choose to land in Uganda is because the premier of Uganda, Idi Amin, he was a rabid anti-Semite. Like he was not afraid to say publicly that he thinks Hitler was a great man. He was, he was just, I think he adored Hitler. I think he adored the strength, perhaps, and therefore there was a rapport between these hijackers who are rabid anti-Semites. Don't let them tell you they're anti-Israel, anti-Semites, and Idi Amin. So so Idi Amin, once again, he's on record for saying terrible things against the Jewish people. Now, it's who were the terrorists? Who were the hijackers? The terrorists. So it's interesting. It was some Arabs and Germans. So we talk about Idi Amin praising Hitler. It was there were Germans involved in this, and in fact, the entire operation it smacked. It was very Germanic. It smacked of Nazism. I'll give you an example. They separated as soon as they landed and they got them into the terminal. They immediately separated Jews from non-Jews. Now, does that sound familiar? It does. So they separated Jews from non-Jews, and the non-Jews they actually allowed to go free. The Jews, they threatened that on July 4th they're going to kill all the Jews, over 100 Jews on that flight. They're going to kill over 100 Jews, and unless 53 freedom fighters, which you and I understand when I say freedom fighters what I really mean. So 53 terrorists, murderers of women and children, so unless they're released from Israel, these 100+ Jews are going to be killed. So it was a terrible time. It was a terrible time, and there was such a conundrum, and the feelings then were low. Like either you gotta agree to their demands, or you have to do something drastic. So Israel right away, they had a double track. The first track was to actually negotiate with the PLO, which is something they never did. To negotiate with the PLO to see what could you do. They're not going to give 53 murderers out, but what could happen? What can Israel do in order to stop this impasse and get those hundreds of Jewish, basically victims of terror from hijacking, to get them released without them being killed? So that's the first thing they did. The next thing they did was a strategy. They said, it's amazing. We've flown, Israel army has flown to Uganda many times because prior to Idi Amin, they had a close relationship with the Ugandans, and they actually, Israel army trained the Ugandan army. And there are rumors they also helped build the airport. I'm not sure if that's true, but bottom line is they knew the layout. They knew the layout, they knew the land, they knew the airport, they knew the runways, right? And so because they knew the airport, they started to strategize. Which, by the way, the fact that they knew this airport, they knew the layout, was a lifesaver. As you know the story, but it's just interesting how things came about. It was it was miraculous. A lot of these steps, it was miracles enclosed in nature. So the non-Jews who were released by the Nazis and the Arabs, the hijackers, the non-Jews, they were grilled by the Israelis. Where are the hostages being kept? Where are the hijackers? Where are the terrorists? Where are they located? From your couple of days there, what is happening? And they gleaned a tremendous amount of information. So this happened on June 27th, the hijacking. So can you imagine? It was like a week later where there was seemingly an impasse, and the threat was July 4th, they're going to kill the Jews. So July 3rd, Israel made a decision. And the defense minister, who at that time was Shimon Peres, right, he said, okay, let's rescue the hostages. So what they did was they took three planes. The lead plane and another two planes full of soldiers, and you'll hear. Now they flew below the radar, so the Ugandans very, very low, which is to fly a jet, right? So they flew it below the radar, and they landed in a remote section of the airport. So the Ugandans were none the wiser that a plane had just landed. They probably had the lights off. I mean, I haven't heard anything different. And in one of the planes was a Mercedes-Benz, which is what the exact model Idi Amin was chauffeured in. And they had a Zaftig Israeli, a big Israeli, who they dressed up to look like Idi Amin, right? And then so aside from the Mercedes-Benz, there were also other cars that came out of these, and it was designed to look exactly like an Idi Amin entourage. They just needed the element of surprise. So can you imagine, they're driving from the edge of the airport, and they have the Mercedes-Benz with the Ugandan flag and the entourage, and the soldiers weren't sure, and it gave Israel an advantage, a few seconds advantage. So Israel immediately started to kill, gun down the terrorists. And they say, I heard this from Sassi Ruvain, who was there. He was one of he said literally within 15 seconds, the hostages were neutralized. Not without casualties, Jewish casualties, but within 15 seconds. In less than an hour, all the hostages, bar one, all the hostages were put on the plane ready to go back to Israel. And so they were all rescued. Now, there were 3 hostages that were killed, but they took their bodies. And there was one hostage called Dora Bloch. Now, Dora had breathing problems. She had asthma. And because she had she was, anxiety or whatever, so she was in bad shape. And so they took her to Ugandan hospital. And there was nothing Israel could do, and they left. Now, the report is that Idi Amin was so furious. He was so furious that he was shamed, by Israel, that he actually had Dora Bloch killed because he was so angry. So he took this old woman, I think she was in her 70s, and he killed her. Just spilled innocent blood for no other reason than she was Jewish, and the Israelis made him look bad. So he was, he got his just rewards. Idi Amin was, chased out of town, but and eventually, he was exiled, and a new regime took over. But he really didn't get his just rewards. Anyway, so 3 hostages were killed, and also the commander of the entire mission. His name was Yonatan Netanyahu, a brother of Benjamin Netanyahu. Was killed. Benjamin Netanyahu was a poet and an author, and he apparently was just this incredible individual. So he was killed. So July 4th, which we know is an American holiday, right, Independence Day, July 4th, 76, was the day that it happened, and the soldiers, and together with the hostages, went on the plane, and they actually gave out l'chaim on the plane. Everybody made a toast, and they cheered one another. They sung songs all the way back to Israel. So before we conclude, I just want to lay a seed, plant a seed. So we all know that there was a Second World War. We all know there was a Holocaust. And we all know many, many Jews were killed. What is less known is that after the Holocaust, Jews were killed as well. So they were eventually allowed out of their DP camps because they didn't know where to house the Jews, how to house so many Jews, survivors. If you call them survivors, bones, skin and bones. So they came out of the DP camps, and they were told, okay, now's go home. So these people, some of them died on the way, but many of them got home. And when they got home and they knocked on their door because the locks were changed, they didn't have keys anyway, they were kicked off the porch to say, it is our house, not your house, and if you come here again, we'll kill you. And this happened all over Europe. Now, there's a story of July 4th, 1946, so 30 years before Entebbe. 30 survivors, Holocaust survivors, came out of the DP camps. They were fed, they got a little healthier, and they made it back to Poland. And they went to their town called Kielce, Poland. On July 4th, 1946, they arrived in Kielce, Poland, to their town, and July 4th, 1946, they were killed. Another 30 Jews were killed. Their sin was coming home to reclaim their to live in their home, to live in their village, their city, whatever. 30 years later, on the very same day, 100 Jews were saved by an Israeli army. This makes all the difference. In 1946, in July 4th, 1946, there was no Israel, there was no Israeli army, and there was nobody to save them. Once Israel claimed independence, and in January of 1949, when all the war stopped for a while, and there was an armistice line, agreement made, and they drew out the lines, etc., the borders, so Israel now could defend its people. So it's the difference between Nazi Germany, Kielce, Poland, and Uganda is Israel. That's the only difference. Because if there was no Israel, nobody else was interested in intervening. Right? Nobody else. I'm sure there were back channels, diplomatic, but it wasn't going anywhere. They were going to kill these terrorists. There were Arabs and German terrorists. They were going to kill them. And they had the permission of Idi Amin. I mean, it can't get worse than that. So the fact that you have Israel, so I think Entebbe teaches us a great lesson, is that those that deride Israel, those that are okay with giving this land back and that land back, and maybe we should leave, and maybe we shouldn't be there, and are we oppressors, etc., etc., etc. The difference between Nazi Germany and 2021 for Jews is Israel. It really is. So Entebbe proved it. Entebbe proved it. So in total, 5 Jews were killed, Dora Bloch, 3 hostages, and Yonatan Netanyahu, but hundreds and hundreds more were rescued. Once that happened, it boosted. It was such a happy time in Israel. You couldn't actually Google the celebrations and the timeline. It was such a happy time in Israel. It was also a time of tremendous confidence that we are unbeatable, unstoppable, just like the Chai Center. It is that we can do anything, and it truly was a tour de force. It was an incredible achievement, and thank God for the IDF. Thank God for Yonatan Netanyahu, blessed memory, and all the soldiers that took place. When Sassi Reuven spoke, the soldiers were not dressed in military gear. They were dressed in odd type of gear. And one of the things they wore was kind of a white linen Japanese-looking hat. I'm not sure why, but he showed it to us. He showed it said this is what everybody had to wear, and we were all in communication. And when we saw the hat, we knew it was one of our soldiers. Why that shape? I don't know. It looked really odd. All right, that's it for today. Please God, we'll reconvene tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow we'll talk a little bit about Begin tomorrow. 1977 was a big year for Begin. God bless.